Hello, today we're going to take you through an ERP migration project. So this one's going to be slightly longer because we're not just going to show you the data analyst agent, but we're also going to show you it connect to the pipeline studio as well in the process. So we're going to start with a new mapping. Here we can map either directly between two systems or map through an enterprise data model if you have one available for your industry or one that you've created yourself. Anything you map between two systems can be converted eventually into its own enterprise data model after your first mapping. So effectively creating your own internal data model which you can enrich as you keep mapping new systems. But the first time you use something that doesn't have an enterprise data model of your own, you do have to map directly between two systems. In this particular scenario, we're looking to migrate between SAP and NetSuite. So we're going to start with the onboarding process. And here we've already set up two systems of SAP and NetSuite. And we've added in the columns, or rather the data sources or the exports that we'd like to migrate from one system to the other system, as well as added in any sorts of contextual documentation that we have in terms of requirements, SME notes, and so on and so forth, as well as a description of what we're trying to do as part of this particular project. So with this, the agent takes all that information, churns it together, and then is able to produce from each of that its understanding of each column. Everything is there with a definition built in by default. If you disagree with anything, you can literally make a change yourself and edit that, approve it. All approvals, all submissions are tracked, so you can know who exactly did that and who exactly made the changes to definitions. And everything is provided with an agent rationale to everything that you built in. And you can filter, change the number of columns that you want to view in there, adding a filter on a particular system that you were reviewing at that point in time, or an interface you're reviewing. Once you're done with the review level, you can then map directly between each of those systems. So where the agent is able to find a direct match with high confidence, it will then automatically approve that match between the two systems. Where it has low confidence, it leaves it there for you to review each of them yourself and then either accept or change where you think it should be mapped to. And where it's not able to find the match, it leaves it unmatched. Now, if you yourself believe that you've got a match, or you think you can have a match that might be not a direct one-to-one match, but more of an indirect match, or maybe it needs a calculation in place, you simply describe the calculation you want. You generate the logic so that the agent will write you your Python code that's effectively going to do that lookup or that migration. And it doesn't matter what kind of logic, as long as some sort of using the columns that you have or the data set that you've given to the agent, you'll be able to create that. And then you can run that sample and create sample output so you can review and check if you're happy with the logic. So you can go through that process on each of them, and when you're happy with it, you can confirm the rule itself within the system, and that becomes a rule that not just forms a documentation, but actually gets translated when you actually build your pipelines. So from here, you can now go and look at the handoff document. The handoff document is what, if you were going to do this migration in another technology, this is the documentation you would give to the engineer or the project team that were actually looking to build this. And here you can add in your mappings, your transformation, all narratives you want in there. A lot of this narrative, some of it is automatically generated. You are using the information you provided it in context, but you can always go in and edit anything that's generated. So you can edit out any of the summaries, anything that you don't like in documentation, preview it before exporting out the documentation in Word, PDF. You also have the ability to change the style of what you want your tables to look like, so it can be aligned with your branding of your internal and save that. There are several different templates that come as standards, so mapping spec, interface specification, and data dictionary, but you can create your own template using the available information and save it so that it can be reusable by any other project team. Once you've got this documentation in hand, you can then go over to the ability to then actually generate the pipeline within the system. So it'll be moving from the agent system, the data analyst agent, to our pipeline studio. So this will generate all the steps that we need within our pipeline studio. And you can also generate test data. So actually mimic what the pipeline would do if you were only just going to use that to effectively create some test data for the engineering team to build the pipeline for migration in a different technology. But if you were going to use our technology, you can go and open this up in Pipeline Studio. So Pipeline Studio effectively shows me those files that I set up, as well as the targets that we have there. We would normally look to make sure we set up the connections for the individual things we want to see. So these are the entities that we want to monitor, the actual APIs and database connections that we want to able to monitor, given the right permissions. Any rules, matching rules, logic can be all stuck into a single place within the application. And so if we go back to the system configuration screen, we can either view it like this, or we can actually view it as a more detailed row item of each individual pipeline. We can effectively add more fields to it, or add more pipelines to it from this point. But if we go back to the pipeline view, now we go and step our way through the individual pipeline that has already been built, or the agent has transferred the metadata across to it. So everything from the data profiling that it did while it was creating the original documentation has been translated here. You can actually see the data quality rules that have been written and run, and any failures that have happened, how many rows were scanned in doing this. The profile of individual columns are exposed in here, so you can, in a very quick way, look to see where you have the main issues with your data and anything you want to change from source to, or from a data profiling, data type profile standpoint. We can also take a look at the actual column alignments, the same thing that we've done within the agent. So the agent's already done this for you, and it's just being translated across to here, along with any of that logic that you wrote and any transformation logic that you created in the previous agent screen. That also translates itself here. So any of that logic that you were able to type and regenerate, if you were to make a change here or rerun the analysis or suggestions here, it will also amend what was also in the other sector of the agent, so that the documentation keeps in line with what it is you're actually building and running. It also will align the allowable values between both systems. So it will analyze both systems set of allowable values and allow you to look at how they map from one system to the other system, and so that it doesn't just send the same value across. So that's done as part of the migration. You can then create your own set of rules, and it first suggests rules of its own, and then you could add to that in terms of set of rules that would be created to match records between systems. So it will look at certain fields, make an attempt to align them, do those keys match. It will look at other way of machine learning. You can actually create a bit of when, then, else type logic to basically be able to clean up the data as you're matching between the systems. And then you can run the rules to see what then happens, how many things were automatically confirmed, how many things were caused as duplication, where you found issues through your migration before you decide to then choose to move on to simulate the migration. So this is a good way of you actually seeing if the records from one system successfully would be mapped to the records from another system before you then decide to then run the migration itself. Now, within the system, we have the ability for you to effectively simulate a migration within the actual, we call it a dry run. So you're able to then dry run based on the fact that you've aligned the data types, you've aligned the column names, you've aligned the allowable values, you've matched the records. You can then dry run the entire migration activity within the system, look at the report from the dry run, check where you have issues, where you've had records that were excluded for any rules, download the record, try and fix the issues of that. And then when you are ready and when you've gotten all the data as clean as possible, you can then run the actual, or schedule it to run and promote this into production, which will then connect to the live systems to then make the migration. So hopefully this has been a great overview of using both the analyst agent as well as the data engineering agent to be able to see how you can go from analyzing your migration, writing the rules using the agent, and then performing the migration and simulations before executing it.